Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to East Central Missouri and the world, and welcome to the James Strong Show podcast number 223, 323. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making us a part of your day. I appreciate it. This podcast was recorded on the morning of Sunday, July the 23rd, from the James Strong Studio in Western St. Charles County. I've talked about this on the podcast before, and it's a theory, a saying, a way of life, a theory, whatever you want to call it. It's called Occam's razor. And simply put, it's if you're trying to solve a problem, if you're trying to find out why things are the way they are, the simplest, most obvious solution is usually the right one. Now, Occam's razor, like most theories, is a theory, and it works quite often, but not always. I will say that if we always went with Occam's razor, we would be a very safe society who probably would still be riding horses. But for the most part, for most things, if you look at why most things fail, or why most things succeed, or why most things are the way they are, it's because of Occam's razor. And today's essay is going to be a number of items that are in the news where Occam's razor was probably just ignored. And the failure or the success of said item is because Occam's razor was ignored. I'm a big fan of Occam's razor, not because I'm not a risk taker. I am a bit of a risk taker, but I don't take stupid risks. In other words, worst case scenario, best case scenario. Best case scenario, I become a 100 millionaire. Worst case scenario, I die. I'm not taking that risk, okay? I'm not interested in dying. I'm going to weigh one against the other and never take that risk. However, risks are meant to be taken, and sometimes you have to ignore the obvious to get results that are different from the ordinary. However, in everyday life, most of the time, most problems, most solutions, Occam's razor can be applied. And I'm going to go over a number of items today in today's essay where Occam's razor was just totally ignored. And in some respects, or in some cases, it cost companies tens of millions of dollars. In other cases, it gained an unbelievable amount of goodness because Occam's razor was ignored, or at least maybe not ignored, but in some cases just really not considered, okay? So we'll go over these 3 or 4 different items in today's news. You've heard of most of them, if not all of them. And of course, UFOs are involved as well, but then aren't they usually? Before that, I did want to just give a quick update on the update to the Jaguar. Spent all day yesterday, Saturday, working on it. And didn't get a whole lot done. In theory, okay, still working on plumbing the car. And you think to yourself, well, come on, you just hook up the hoses and you do your thing. Well, the only problem with that is everything was taken apart. Most of it by me, and then some of it put back together by somebody else, the engine, that is. And in replumbing this car, I got the engine part of it easy, okay? But there's the heat box, the with the heater coil and everything, which is up against the side, the firewall of the car. And not only is it different from anything else I've ever seen before, but it's different from most of the Jaguar Mark 7s that were manufactured. Mine's a little, it's different. Okay. It was an early off model that really isn't covered in the manuals. And not only that, but the guy who worked on it got my engine running outside of the car on a test bench, then put it into my car. In other words, he took some of the stuff off of it that needs to be on it when it's in the car. So what I had to do is take a whole bunch of stuff that had already been assembled by me or the guy who put the engine together had to disassemble all that, find out what I needed, found out I was missing a part that has to be ordered from the UK. So when it comes, I can put this thing, that piece on the car, and then I will be able to plumb the plumbing. I also put on a couple other car parts, did a few other things, but for the most part, the vast majority of my 7-hour workday was done trying to figure that out. This job, and when I looked into doing this car, the one thing that everybody said is, look, don't get in a hurry. Don't get disappointed, because you're going to run into roadblocks that you cannot even imagine. And if you think it's going to take X amount of time to do something, put a 0 behind it. And that's how much time you're really going to spend on doing something. And friends, for the most part, that information is very accurate. But I had a good day. I learned a lot as I'm learning this. And again, the goal of this car is to get it up and running. And then when I'm done, to be an expert at it. And like I said, I put the exhaust, took it apart, put it together, took it apart, put it together, took it apart, put it together. So I know that thing like the back of my hand. I've done the same thing with the plumbing. Okay. So by the time I get this thing plumbed, I should know it like the back of my hand. Now, today's podcast, Occam's razor ignored. Several items in the news. One of them you may have heard, the Craftsman factory. Back in 2019, Craftsman, which is now owned by Black & Decker Stanley, they are the largest tool manufacturer, hand tool manufacturer in the world. Black & Decker bought Stanley. Then Black & Decker Stanley bought Craftsman. And then Craftsman makes tools for a lot of other people and private labels them. And some time ago, I think they used to make the majority of their tools in Arkansas someplace. Maybe Illinois Tool Works used to make them for them. But then they shipped it all over to Asia, and the quality became poor. Craftsman tools, once upon a time, I have lots of them. I like Craftsman tools. They were kind of the 80-20 rule when you bought stuff. Was it as good as a Snap-on? No. But it was maybe a third the price of a Snap-on. And if it did break on you, they gave you a new one. No questions asked, no charge. Okay, so I've bought a lot of Craftsman tools, and the quality has gone down because they went from the U.S. manufacturing plants to the Asian manufacturing plants. And the way Western manufacturers make tools better is they use upgraded materials, they use high-tech tooling methods, and they make them stronger and just make them work better. Quite often in China, the way they make things stronger is they just make them bigger. And the bad thing about a wrench is when you make a wrench bigger, it's going to be stronger. But when it's bigger, it doesn't fit into the tight spots that you need. So if you have a open-end spanner wrench that you need to tighten or loosen a half-inch nut, and it doesn't really go on and you don't have any swing to loosen it or tighten it, you can't do the job, okay? That's what the customers were finding with these Asian-made Craftsman tools. So Black & Decker Stanley says, you know what? We're going to build a state-of-the-art factory outside of Dallas-Fort Worth, put $90 million into this factory, and we're going to make all the tools for Craftsman in this facility. Bring it back to the USA. In theory, because U.S. labor costs a lot more than Chinese labor, it was going to cost more, but they automated everything so that they said their costs would be online with China because direct labor was going to be a much lower portion of the equation. Now, here's where Occam's razor comes in. In theory, this all works well because the United States has been the leader in so many things, mainly because our productivity is so much better than everybody else's. So it just makes sense. Look, introduce more productivity. Labor costs don't matter. You can make a better product for less money. Plus, you don't have the supply chain problems that you have if you import everything from Asia. Now, here's where Occam's razor comes in. Do you know where they brought all the automated equipment in from? Think about where is probably the worst place you could bring in automated equipment from? No, not China, because, well, Chinese stuff is not the best. you get it quick and it's going to work, not as well as you'd like, but it's going to be okay. No, they bought their automated equipment from Belarus. Now, many of you, in fact, few of you have probably heard of the country of Belarus, okay? Now, you may have heard of it in the last few years because they are the right-hand man. The president of Belarus is the right-hand, Lukashenko, I think is his name, is the right-hand man of Vladimir Putin. He's a puppet. It's a puppet state of the Soviet Union or Russia or whatever they're calling it this week. I think they call it Russia, but it acts like the Soviet Union, wants to be the Soviet Union again because they want to take in Ukraine as part of their country. But basically, Belarus is a puppet state of Russia. And they have huge sanctions against them. So, and they're not known as a cutting-edge, high-tech country, okay? They're like, what I want to say, they're like a second fiddle to Russia, and Russia is not a high tech country. When it comes to weapons, maybe, or maybe not. They're not a high tech country, and they're second fiddle to a non high tech country. So when all this equipment came over from Belarus, it didn't work, and when they went to replace it, that stuff didn't work, or they couldn't get it, or there were sanctions, or because there's a lot of sanctions against the country of Belarus because of their involvement in the Ukraine-Russian war. It was announced that they're going to close this plant. It never really did get up and running. $90 million. Now, why was Occam's razor ignored? Well, if you're going to automate a plant, and if the whole success of this plant is going to hinge upon the automation, why would you buy the automation from a third world country that's not reliable and is a puppet state to Russia? The obvious choice would be buy it from Germany, buy it from Japan, buy it from the United States, buy it from Korea. Okay, not from Belarus. Now, why would they buy it from Belarus? I've researched this and I've never found out why, but I suspect I know why. And this is, pardon me if I step on toes here, because I don't mean to belittle those with a lot more education than me, but this sounds like MBA 101. Why? We could have bought this equipment from Germany, but we can buy it from Belarus for half the price. And the results are going to be the same. And the productivity is going to be the same. Okay, who says the productivity is going to be the same? Why, the guy from Belarus selling it to me. And they believed it. So on paper, this was going to work. But if you were to just investigate this just a little bit further, or maybe ask a few people, like maybe shift supervisors or guys on the floor, hey, what do you think about this equipment from Belarus? They're going to look at this and say, this garbage is never going to work. A $90 million plant has been closed and is up for sale with no buyers available. So what are they going to do? They're going to just go ahead and let the Chinese build this stuff again. Unbelievable. If they had ignored Occam's razor, if they had, and now I get it, this was going to be something cutting edge, and you can't say, Occam's razor, maybe you can't manufacture high-tech stuff in the USA because the costs are too high. If you automate it, it doesn't cost so much. But who makes the best automation equipment in the world? The Germans, the US, China, Japan, Korea, not Belarus. Come on. It'd be like, I'm going to go to a 5-star restaurant in Albania. All right. There aren't 5-star restaurants in Albania. Okay. You get what I'm trying to say. And this mistake cost Black & Decker Stanley, I want to say it cost them $90 million. It cost them a whole lot more than that. That's how much the plant cost to open. And it's been open for what? 4 years at least, and they haven't been able to make tools. So it's cost them hundreds of millions of dollars because of a bad mistake. Another case where Occam's razor was ignored, and in a good way this time. If you've read the news, now we've been blessed here in the Midwest. We've had actually pretty good weather this summer. Spring was warm and dry. Our summer has been warm to hot, like a normal summer, but nothing out of the ordinary. We had a 100-degree day or two, but we've had actually pretty much rain that's cooled things off and kept the grass kind of green and has helped the crops. But elsewhere in the country, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, parts of Southern California away from the coast, they've been cooking, okay? It's been very hot in that part of the country and other parts of the country as well. And if you remember a year or two ago, Texas had a heat wave that not even quite this bad, and the grid crashed. Nothing has crashed this year. And taking it one step further, they really haven't had a whole lot of problems, and they haven't had a lot of cost problems with this either. Why, you ask? Well, they should have seen this coming, because more and more, what is electricity generated by? Okay, less and less it's generated by coal. Okay, sure, we've made headways. More is generated by wind than ever before. More is generated by hydro. More is generated by solar. All those renewable sources continue to inch up, not 10 and 20% at a time, but 1 and 2 and 3 and 4% at a time. So they continue to add to the grid. The renewables do. But they're closing down coal-fired plants at least the same rate. So if renewables are going up and coal is going down, why aren't things the same? It's because of natural gas. More and more electric plants are being fueled by natural gas, especially in the shale high areas like Texas and New Mexico, okay? And because we had a warm winter, and because they're drilling for lots of natural gas, especially in the high shale areas of the Permian Basin, gas prices are basically 60% less than they were last summer, and even 30% less than they were in July of 2021. So natural gas prices are way down. Why? Because of supply and demand. In fact, bill payers can usually thank warm weather. They can thank the unusually warm weather this past winter for having a lot of gas that's unburned. And the strong renewable electricity generation has taken some of the pressure off too. You know, the solar and the wind. How much does natural gas cost? Well, as of Wednesday, futures for August deliveries on Wednesday, 4 days ago, was $2.60 per million BTU. That's down 67% from futures a year earlier. Futures are down even 7% in July. And normally they go up in July, but this time they went down 7% in July. In fact, on the spot prices in some big markets like Chicago and New York, they've been cheaper than the national benchmark. Prices for coal, and that's competition for natural gas in many power markets, that too has plunged from record highs, notched last year's as well. So if the stifling heat lingers into August, prices could go up a bit, but from $2.60 to maybe $3. But then as soon as the weather cools off, they're going to go down. In fact, when winter hits, they expect natural gas prices to be perhaps as low as $2.25 per million BTUs, which is unbelievably cheap. Now, how is Occam's razor included in that? And why did this catch everybody by surprise? Well, natural gas stores are high, and you would think the utility companies would know how much natural gas they have to burn in order to generate so much electricity. And if they had the extra stores, and if supply was down, if supply was up and demand was down, wouldn't they think that they'd be cheaper? Now, we're making an assumption here because this story out of the Wall Street Journal does say that it caught everybody by surprise. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. Maybe the utility companies, the electric companies, are just smarter than we thought. And they knew this, but they just kept their mouths shut. Bottom line is, even though we're requiring record electricity right now with all this heat in the country, it's fine because natural gas prices are still very low because there's still a lot of demand. In fact, fossil fuel prices are down everywhere. Gasoline by my house, $2.99 a gallon for regular. $2.99. I'm not stuttering. That's really how much it costs. Now, that's a gas station by my house, and it's not that price most places. But again, supply and demand. We've got extra supply, so the price is cheaper. The motion picture industry. Now, I've been saying this for years, and I know this is an age thing because I don't see many movies anymore. There's a movie that's going to be out. I've seen the previews too, with Joaquin Phoenix. Ridley Scott directed it, called Napoleon. It's about the life of Napoleon. And years ago, I think back in the early 1970s, there was a movie made about Napoleon starring Rod Steiger called Waterloo. And the folks took me to see that at the old Airway Drive-In, and it was a fantastic movie. I still think of that movie. 50 years later, I still remember that movie. Is that 50 years? 1973? Yeah, 50 years later, I'm still thinking of that movie. And this is supposed to be an epic film just like that. Now, why is that different? Because, friends, they don't make movies like that anymore. It's not a Tom Cruise Mission Impossible 75. It's not the 50th James Bond movie. It's not Fast and Furious 17. It's not one more dopey comic book movie. In other words, it's something a little bit different, okay? Something that takes imagination, acting, costumes, not just CGI. And maybe that's the way they need to go if Hollywood gets out of this strike problem, because I've heard Barry Diller was quoted as saying, and he's a big Hollywood guy. He knows he's made a lot of money in Hollywood. He's very active in Hollywood. He knows what he's talking about. Basically, Barry Diller says that if Hollywood doesn't get its act together by fall with these strikes, Hollywood as we know it could be done, because Hollywood has gambled big time on two things. First of all, they've gambled big time on streaming. And if Hollywood stops making movies and there's nothing to stream, what do you think people are going to do with the streaming services they pay X dollars a month for? That's right. They'll cancel them. Why would you pay $70 a month for a streaming service if there's nothing to show? They'll just cancel it. And that's 100% of their income stream, their customer. And if they go broke, no one's going to have money to film Hollywood movies, because there'll be no place to show them, because movie theater attendance is way down. Okay, I'm getting off target. That's not the whole Occam's razor thing. The Occam's razor thing when it comes to the movies is, did you really think you could make sequels to the same 7 movies and make money forever? You'd have to think no. And for many years, they thought, you know what? We need to sell to two types of people. Actually, we need to sell to two audiences, young people and the Chinese, because they'll watch anything. Well, scratch the Chinese. And there's a story about a guy named Fang Fang. He's a retiree. He lives in Shanghai. And he's grown acquainted with Hollywood's biggest exports. He loves James Bond films. He loves Tom Cruise movies. He loves Fast and Furious movies. But recently, Fang has found movies made in China a whole lot more compelling to what America has offered. In fact, Fang, who's 60 years old, says Hollywood movies are more and more nonsense nowadays. Superheroes like Spider-Man and Captain America are so superficial, I won't even watch them on the IMAX 3D screen. Now, Fang Fang and millions of other Chinese moviegoers are forcing Hollywood executives to confront an alarming new reality. The country that once embraced their films is now turning away from them. This summer has been a bloodbath for the U.S. entertainment industry in China, which is the world's second largest markets. And basically, the Chinese are moving towards movies made in China. Total box office sales for U.S. films in China, they've hit almost $600 million for the 6 months of this year, which is a lot. But last year during the same period, not 600 million. How about 2 billion? Okay. So that's a decrease of almost 3 times. Okay. Now, box office tallies of some summer releases have been disastrous compared to the movies they've had in the past. Walt Disney's Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny made $3.3 million as of July 18th. That's according to the Chinese ticketing firm Maoyan. That's about the same amount of money as Denmark made, okay? The animated parable called Elemental, $15 million, about the same as Mexico. This is a country of 1.3 billion people, friends. Now, last weekend, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 opened to $25 million. Now, the installment that opened in 2018, the one before that, that's 66% below that. Now, few performances so far have been as anemic as The Little Mermaid. The Little Mermaid only grossed $3.7 million since late May, and putting it on par with one of the most populous countries in the world, China, is about the same as Chile. Now, on Chinese social media and the Shanghai theater groups, some moviegoers, they're going to cancel the Chinese for this, but some moviegoers expressed reluctance to see a movie that cast a black actress in the role of Ariel. Quote, "The Little Mermaid is too focused on political correctness," said Zhao. First name omitted. He's a Shanghai freelancer, or she's a Shanghai freelancer in her 40s, who only gave her first name or her last name. She said, "I go to the cinema for entertainment, not to be instilled with certain values." I'm going to repeat that. I go to the cinema for entertainment, not to be instilled with certain values. In other words, Zhao didn't want to be preached to. And I've heard this from other people. Now, personally, I don't care if The Little Mermaid is black, white, yellow, green. I don't care. But The Little Mermaid's white. I guess if you wanted to, you could make a story about George Washington Carver and cast a white man in that role. That wouldn't be right, because George Washington Carver was a real man and The Little Mermaid wasn't. John Henry, the railroad worker of folklore. John Henry was black in the folklore version of him. What if you cast a white man in that role? I guess it would be fine, but people don't want to be lectured to, because they've known all along that the mythical character John Henry was black. The Chinese don't want to be lectured to. And it goes a little bit further. Not only do the Chinese not want to be lectured to, not only do the Chinese go to the cinema for entertainment and they don't want to be instilled with certain values. Here's the big thing. And I'm going to paraphrase and put my own words into this. Basically, the Chinese are sick and tired of the colonialist Americans wagging their finger in the face of the Chinese saying, "Look, here's how things are done, and we know better than you." The Chinese are basically saying, "No, you really don't. Your stuff isn't entertaining anymore. We're not going to watch it." Because I don't care if you're from China, if you're from the US, if you're from the UK, if you're from Pakistan, if you're from Chile, if you're from Australia, if you're from Mongolia, if you're from Canada, if you're from Sweden, it doesn't matter where you're from. At the end of a long workday, if you decide you want to go see a motion picture, almost nobody wants to go to a motion picture thinking, "You know what? I want to learn a social lesson from this movie." No. They go to a motion picture because, you know what? I have worked long and hard all week long. I want to sit back and be entertained. And if they go and they're not entertained, friends, they're not going to go. And the Chinese are staying home in droves. And it's hurting Hollywood big time. Now, why was Occam's razor ignored? Traditionally, motion pictures have been successful when they introduce escapism. And to be fair, James Bond, Mission Impossible, Indiana Jones, Star Wars, the comic book, that's all escapism. And it is. But you need to be original. You can't have the 17th rendition of the same thing and expect people to continue to go back and see it. I haven't been to a movie. I take it back. We go to movies occasionally, but it's to see movies that you've never heard of. They're not, I wouldn't call them art films, but they're stories with good actors, quite often from the UK, low budget stuff, or at least low release stuff here in this country. Maybe it's more popular over there, starring established actors who have won Academy Awards or have played on Broadway or in what's a big theater over in England? I can't think of it off the top of my head, but they're actors with a story that's entertaining. Okay. Now I'll see movies sometimes, and I'll go see James Bond films just because I'm a big James Bond fan. But I'm here to tell you, if you remember the podcast when I reviewed the last James Bond film, it was horrible. It was terrible. It wasn't that Daniel Craig did a good job, but it was not a Bond film. I don't know what it was. But when you throw the same stuff out there and it's not entertaining, people are going to stop going. The Chinese have. Maybe the young people in this country haven't yet. I don't know. But Occam's razor is you need to give people entertaining stuff they're going to enjoy, stuff that isn't lecturing and you're not telling them how to act, and it's not a social program, it's entertainment. And the big thing they're missing, it needs to be different. It needs to be something different than you can see on television every day. If you want to watch a PBS documentary on social justice, that's fine. Because if you get tired of it, you just turn it off and you go in the other room and do something else. If you pay big money, $15, $20 to see a motion picture, take time, go out and sit down there, you're going to sit through the whole thing, and it better knock your socks off or you're going to be disappointed. Occam's razor says, give the public what they want and they'll give you money. Hollywood said, we're not going to follow that plan. And look where it's got them. Real quick, UFOs are back in the news. This will be the last one. UFOs are having more of an impact on combat training for America's fighter pilots. You may have heard this story. In fact, we touched on it some last week. John Kirby, who's the National Security Council's coordinator for strategic communications under President Biden, and he's a retired Rear Admiral for the U.S. Navy, he said the unanswered questions surrounding UFOs must now be treated as a legitimate issue. In a White House briefing on Monday, he told reporters, when pilots are out trying to do training and they see things, they're not sure what they are, and it has an impact on their ability to perfect their skills. Now, we talked about David Grush, who last week, his explosive UFO claims sparked the open congressional oversight committees that are scheduled to start, Monday, Tuesday? Sometime this week, Tuesday or Wednesday of this week, they're scheduled to open. In fact, last month, Grush came forward alleging that U.S. military and defense contractors are hiding evidence of crashed UFOs recovered beings and UFO-related deaths. And again, according to comments made by U.S. Senator Marco Rubio last month, Grush's testimony has been notably collaborated in classified hearings by other defense sector witnesses. So you got John Kirby, the National Security Council's coordinator for strategic communications, also saying, hey, this is a big deal. We need to be looking at this. And they're going to have these hearings next week. Okay? There's also a new guy, and this is one that just came out of the blue, a former U.S. Marine. He had last week sensationally claimed that his unit stumbled upon secret military rendezvous with alien spacecraft back when they were on a humanitarian mission in Indonesia. In fact, Michael Herrera, he was a part of a U.S. Navy humanitarian mission during the 2009 Sumatra earthquake. During that mission, he says he encountered a crashed UFO. After he looked at the UFO and went up to it, he was ambushed by a paramilitary unit until he was searched and had his camera confiscated by mysterious soldiers in black, not to be confused with Men in Black, or maybe to be confused by Men in Black because they're the same thing. He was warned several times not to tell anybody about the strange flying saucer craft that he saw in the Sumatran jungle. Now he's saying that he's had numerous encounters with black helicopters flying over his house and his dad's house. They're getting so low that they're scaring the dogs, and he's afraid for his life. In fact, he said that I feel like Jeffrey Epstein, who really didn't kill himself. And Herrera added, I don't feel like harming myself. Everybody makes the joke that Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself, so the same goes for me. I don't have any reason to harm myself, so if anything happens to me, I didn't do it. Okay, those two stories. Why is Occam's razor involved in this one? Now, those of you who know me, or at least have listened to my podcast, know well that I want to believe UFO guy. Okay. In fact, UFOs are out there, because a UFO is anything you can't identify. I'd love there to be spacecraft out there. Okay. I'd love there to be Bigfoot. I'd love there to be all this stuff. But sometimes even in this, you have to apply Occam's razor. And Occam's razor is being applied by a U.S. UFO expert from the UK. And he asked this question. He says, why would a spacecraft able to withstand the stress of interstellar travel suddenly crash once it reaches America? That expert is Nigel Watson. And he says he knows why these people are making all these claims without any proof at all. It's all about the money. In fact, Watson claims says that claims from the United States Air Force veteran Herrera is proof that the U.S. government collected smashed aircraft. It's just false. Okay. David Grush has made the outlandish claims, he says, that if were true, would herald a huge story. But British UFO expert Nigel Watson claims it's almost certainly not true. And that he says he knows that the motivation behind Grush's wild claims is money. Now, Watson told the UK Star, he said, there's a big lecture circuit in the U.S., and speakers can earn several $1,000s for telling UFO believers what they want to hear. Many of them also feature they're featured in TV documentaries, so it's a handy side hustle. Watson poured cold water on the idea that, from Roswell onwards, dozens of alien vessels that were advanced enough to cross thousands of light years of space suddenly developed some technical fault and crashed in the New Mexico desert. Watson then added that despite numerous claims that exotic alien craft were in the U.S. government's hands, human space flight is still very primitive, very expensive, and very, very dangerous. Watson said Boeing obviously didn't have any alien help, or Elon Musk and SpaceX. Watson goes on to say many people in all strata of government believe aliens might be visiting us, but none have really supplied any firm evidence. Now, perhaps that will change next week. Perhaps not. But perhaps, says Watson, they think that by saying the government has this information, they hope they'll flush it out into the open. Now, there's also a small cartel of powerful people in the USA who want to promote the idea that UFOs are real. Many tend to regard them as paranormal and exotic, despite lack of evidence. In fact, Nigel Watson added, he said, the CIA has confessed it allowed UFO explanations for sightings by their secret spy aircraft, and the promotion of UAPs has now helped fund the detection of ET and foreign drones. In other words, they're false flags so they get more money for their operations. Watson said, I suspect some of these CSA types have just found it useful to use their past employment for fame and fortune, and it's more to do with entertainment than science or disclosure. And that's all these government guys like Lou Elizondo, who, yes, he used to work for the government. Now he doesn't. Now he's saying all this top secret stuff and making a lot of money off of it. Okay. They contacted David Grush and asked him to reply. He hasn't responded for comment. And you have to ask the question. And I've asked the question, okay? And I'm asking this question as I'm looking at a poster in my studio of Bigfoot country that highlights all the sightings of Bigfoot in Northern California. So what I like for Bigfoot to, would I like to believe that Bigfoot's real? Yeah, and I kind of do, and I kind of think it's certainly possible. But they found 0 dead bodies. And as far as UFO spacecrafts go, if they've recovered 1 crashed aircraft, why are we still flying rockets the way we are? It is very expensive and it is very dangerous, okay? Why don't we take some of that technology and do something with it? Now, that's not to dismiss the fact that the Tic Tac UFOs and everything else, there's something going on there and we don't know what it is. But Occam's razor says the most obvious data is usually what's going on. And according to Nigel Watson from the UK, the most obvious data is these guys want to make a buck. Maybe he's right. Maybe he's wrong. Well, that's it. I'm done. JamesStrongShow@hotmail.com. That's my email address. Send me your email. I will send you a link to the podcast upon publication so you can download it and listen to it at your leisure. Listen to the show. Pass it on. Tell your friends. Tell your enemies. Tell whoever you want to, because we love to grow the footprint of the show. That's it. I'm done. Until next time, this is James Strong saying adios.